What's up, Internet? Welcome to Mo's Garage. In today's video, we're replacing the transmission control module on our 2006 Nissan Xterra. Alright guys, so the reason I'm replacing the TCM on the Xterra today is because I was out driving the Xterra like normal and all of a sudden it just happened to lose a lot of power. I happened to look down at the dash and I saw that I had a check engine light, and so once I scanned the system I got a P1757, which is a front brake solenoid circuit, and that's usually the telltale sign that you need to replace your TCM. Now, something that might help you, which I happen to find on my Xterra, it may not be the same for you, but I ended up pulling over, turning off the car, turning it back on, and I basically realized that I can drive the car without putting it into drive. I was able to go through gears 1 through 3 as if it were a manual transmission. So basically I learned that when I put it in drive, the car would shift up no problem, but then it struggled to shift back down. Now, to replace the TCM, it's actually not very difficult. It can be a little bit intimidating, but overall it's not too bad. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. Alright guys, so the first thing we want to do to replace the transmission control module is to go ahead and remove the negative cable on the battery. We will be disconnecting some wires down in the TCM, so it's important to get that down. Then we want to go ahead and we want to pull out our transmission fluid dipstick. This is just to help our transmission fluid drain a little bit easier. You may have a 10mm bolt holding this down. Mine is long gone, so I don't need to worry about that. Now, since we do have to drain the transmission fluid, now would be a good time to go ahead and replace it if you need to. I will not be reusing mine. I will definitely go ahead and replace it. Alright, so then from there we want to go ahead and get underneath the vehicle, but before you do so, you want to go ahead and support it with something like jack stands. I myself am using some old steely wheels that I use kind of like ramps. Alright guys, so underneath the vehicle you want to go ahead and slide in your drain pan, and then you're going to have a 19mm bolt right here for the drain plug. Now it looks like when you release this you might end up making a mess, so just be ready for that. Alright, and once you have your transmission fluid drained, you want to go ahead and replace the crush washer on this drain plug, and then we just want to go ahead and put it back in so we don't lose it. Alright, then we can go ahead and snug it up. I'm sure there's a torque spec for this, but I'm just going to go ahead and snug it up by feel. That should do it. Okay, so up next we just have to remove all the bolts that hold the oil pan to the transmission, and these are all going to be 10mm bolts. Alright guys, so this corner bolt over here by the drain plug is being a little difficult, so I'm going to go ahead and try to get it with the ratcheting wrench. 10mm, just like everything else. Alright you guys, so at this point what we want to do is we want to go ahead and remove 12 bolts that's holding in the valve body to the transmission. You do need to be careful with some of these wires. We'll go ahead and disconnect those as we go along. But here are the 12 bolts that we're going to need to remove. Now when you remove these 12 bolts, I want you to note that there's going to be 3 different sizes of bolts. You don't need to worry about that right now. I will definitely let you guys know where these bolts go when that time comes. Alright, so once you have all the bolts down, there's a plug right in here that you need to unclip. And then it looks like you also need to unplug this green one. Alright guys, so now that we have the valve body out, I just want to point out this is that little area where I unhooked the main harness, and then this right here is the little green guy that I was struggling with. So with this little green connector, what you want to do is you want to go ahead and press these 2 guys right here and pull out. But as you guys just saw, it was a lot easier said than done. So I'm going to go ahead and start working on the valve body, and I'm going to let this keep draining. Alright guys, so here we have the valve body, and as you can see right here, this is where the transmission control module is. Looks very similar to the new remanufactured one that I have here. Alright guys, so to remove this TCM, we need to go ahead and remove these connectors here. So, not sure how well you guys can see this, but there are 2 clips right here. You got to squeeze in and pull out. And it's the same thing on the other one. There we go. Then we have this guy. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and remove all these solenoids, and to do so, you're gonna use a 5mm Allen key. And these actually break off pretty easy. Alright, so to remove these guys, all you gotta do is just pop them out. They should pop out pretty easy. And I'm gonna go ahead and set them next to the valve body in the order that they came out. Alright, so now to remove the TCM from the valve body, we have all these 5mm Allen keys. And then we should be able to just pop this guy out, put in the new one, and then go ahead and reassemble everything back together. Alright guys, so now that I've broken off the 5mm Allens, there's also a 10mm bolt right here. Alright, so now I'm just removing these 5mm Allen bolts, and I'm just kind of putting them down kind of in the same order that they came off in case they're different sizes. Alright guys, so at this point we should be able to just lift up on this. And it looks like I forgot one up here. Alright. Then we can go ahead and set this guy into place. And we can go ahead and start reinstalling everything. Alright guys, so I have the bolts reinstalled and snugged up. Now the torque spec for these are 10 foot-pounds, but since I only have an Allen key, I just went ahead and snugged them up by hand. Now these three guys down here, I haven't been able to properly secure them, and actually as it turns out, there are nuts on the underside. So when you're taking this apart, be sure not to lose these. So I didn't even know these were here. Now it looks like these help secure in this screen. When you're servicing your transmission, you might be tempted to go ahead and remove this, replace it with another one as if it were a filter, but this is really just a screen. There's really no need to replace this. Any metal shavings that are in the fluid, I guess Nissan decided that a magnet would be more than sufficient to catch those shavings. Don't ask me why. So we'll go ahead and clean out the transmission pan once that time comes. Now that I have these guys on here, I'm gonna go ahead and snug it up using my Allen key and my 10mm socket. Alright, so now it's time to go ahead and reinstall the solenoids. I try to set these aside in the order that they came off so that it's easy to just reinstall them. So you just gotta pick one up, drop it in here, make sure that the connector gets connected. Then you can push it down, pop it into place, and then you can go ahead and tighten the bolt. Alright, and same with the TCM. I'm just going to go ahead and snug it up by hand. Since I don't have a torque wrench, 10 foot-pounds isn't a whole lot, so do not over tighten these. Alright, and now I'm just going to go ahead and do the rest. Alright, so once you're done putting the TCM together and putting all the solenoids together, let's not forget to go ahead and install our clips. Alright guys, so now that we have this thing reassembled and ready to go back into the vehicle, I did want to talk about the bolts that hold this onto the transmission. As I mentioned previously, there are 3 different sizes. So we have 6 long bolts, 4 kind of small bolts, and then we have 1 bolt that's really small. If you end up purchasing this Dorman product similar to what I have, it comes with instructions and it shows you exactly where each one of them goes. So let's go ahead and get underneath the car and get this thing back into place. Alright guys, so now it's time to go ahead and reinstall the valve body. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and plug in this green connector back into the transmission up here. Be careful not to drop the valve body. Alright, so when you're putting this guy in, there's this plunger that you need to make sure you align correctly with the arm here in the transmission. Alright, so here I'm just installing a bolt, try to help hold this in place. Alright, so that 1 bolt should hold it just enough. And then I'm going to take the smallest bolt, and this guy goes right in here. This is supposed to be like an indexing bolt. Kind of helps get the valve body aligned. Alright, and I'm just adding another bolt right here to make sure that everything is held in place and I can finally let go of the valve body. Alright, cool. Alright guys, so here's a diagram of all the bolts that we're going to be installing on the TCM. As you can see here, we have 3 different kinds of bolts. We have bolts labeled A, B, and C. C is that one bolt that's really short, and it's the indexing bolt. And then we have the A's, which are the shorter bolts, and then B are the longer bolts. Now these bolts here that I have circled are the ones that I just installed. So we have C, which is the indexing bolt, and then 2 A's just to kind of hold the valve body up in place. And now I'm going to go ahead and install the rest of the bolts. The bolts do torque down to 70 inch-pounds, which is not a lot, so be careful, don't over tighten those. I'm just going to go ahead and tighten them by hand. Alright guys, so here we have the transmission pan, and as you can see, this transmission fluid does seem to be a little bit dark, but not too terrible. There's not a whole lot of metal shavings on here, or at least nothing unusual. The weird thing that I did notice about this oil pan though is that there's no gasket or RTV. There is this red kind of sealant here. Not sure what that's about, but otherwise there was no gasket, so I'm just going to use the one that I purchased anyways, and we'll go from there. Alright everybody, so we have the transmission pan installed. All the bolts are torqued to 70 inch-pounds. I went ahead and I did that off camera just because there's still quite a few more things left to do, and I don't want this video to be too long. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and refill the transmission. Alright guys, so to refill the transmission, what you want to do is you want to start off by pouring in as much transmission fluid as you took out. So I'm going to be using these oil jugs to kind of figure out how much transmission fluid we took out. Alright guys, so in this jug we have 4 quarts, and then in this other jug we have just a little bit shy of 3 quarts. So I'm going to go ahead and call that 7 quarts that we need to add to the transmission. Alright, so let's go ahead and pull out our dipstick. Then we can go ahead and put in our funnel. Alright guys, so now we can go ahead and add our transmission fluid. One of the nice things about these containers though is that it tells you how many quarts you have left in here. So on the second container, I'm just going to go ahead and pour it until I get down to the 1 quart level. Alright guys, so I have the dipstick back in. I've cleaned up some of my mess. I've gone ahead and I've reconnected the negative on the battery, and so now the next thing to do is to go ahead and start the car, check for leaks, and take it on a test drive. Alright guys, so I have the car started, and as you can see here, it's cold and the idle is a little high, but that's normal. So now what we want to do is we want to come over here to the gear, and we want to just cycle through all the gears for about 5 seconds each. And what this does is it just really helps to kind of cycle all that fluid through the transmission. Alright, and so then once you've done that, now we're going to go ahead and wait until we get to operating temperature. Then we're going to go ahead and check the transmission fluid with the engine running. Alright guys, so with the engine running, you also want to come down to underneath the vehicle, make sure that you don't see any leaks coming from either the gasket or the drain plug. Over here on the frame rail, you can see that there's some transmission fluid leaking, but that's from when I spilled it up top. Alright guys, so it's been about 10-15 minutes or so of the car just idling, and now it's up to operating temperatures. So now let's go ahead and check the transmission fluid level. So similar to checking your oil, you want to go ahead and wipe off the first wipe. Then you can go ahead and reinsert the dipstick. And then take the reading the second time. As you can see right now, it's actually a little bit low. We need to add some more. Alright guys, so I went ahead and I added the last quart that I had, and it looks like that filled up the transmission up nicely. So now from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take it on a test drive to make sure that the transmission is operating as it should. Alright guys, so I've been driving the Xterra for about 14 miles now in stop and go traffic, and so far it seems to be shifting pretty well. So far no check engine light, and since my gas light is on, I'm going to go ahead and fill up. Alright guys, so it's been about 2 months now since I've replaced the TCM on the Xterra, and everything seems to be working out fine. So now we have yet another successful repair in the books. Now before I let you guys go, I do want to go ahead and point out that I did have a second code when I pulled the codes on the Xterra when I was having the shifting issues, but that also went away with the TCM, so I wasn't really too concerned about that. The main one I was concerned with was with the trans brake code, and that's because I knew that that was most likely going to be the TCM. The other code is most likely a code that's just related to the issue with the TCM. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.